So the rebirth of the nation Israel marks the final generation of man upon the earth in this present order. And God said, "And so shall I gather again my people Israel that have been scattered among the heathen, and I will bring them back into their own land, and I will establish them there." And so we saw the miracle of a nation born in a day. We stand across from the Knesset, which houses the Israeli government, and here we see the fulfillment of God's wonderful word. Even as recently as 200 years ago, many men scoffed at the predictions. The prophet Daniel, 2,500 years ago, said that in the last days, there will be an increase in man's knowledge and technology to the extent that man would be traveling around the world. 200 years ago, the famous French philosopher Voltaire, speaking of Sir Isaac Newton, said, "Look at the mighty mind of Newton. When he got in his dotage, he began to study the book called the Bible. And it seems in order to credit its fabulous nonsense, we must believe, says Newton, that the knowledge of mankind will be so increased that we shall be able to travel at 50 miles an hour. The poor dotard." Brilliant men like Voltaire mocked the men of faith. And yet we see that Newton's faith has been substantiated, whereas Voltaire's criticism now seems foolish. From a biblical standpoint, one of the reasons I believe that man has come to the end of his time is the rebirth of the nation Israel. Finally, Daniel was brought in, and Daniel said unto the king, "God has shown to you the kingdoms of the world, those empires that will govern this world. In your dream, you saw a great image. It had a head of gold. It had shoulders of silver. It had a stomach of brass and feet of iron and clay." Daniel said, "Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold, but your empire is to be replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire, the shoulders of silver. That empire, in turn, will be replaced by the Grecian Empire, the stomach of brass. That, in turn, by the Roman Empire, the legs of iron. The final world-governing empire will be a federation of European nations that are related to the Roman Empire, but they will be joined together in a democratic union." It is an event that was predicted by most of the Bible prophets and by Jesus Christ himself. As he gave the signs of the last days, he told his disciples that when the fig tree began to bud forth, that they would know that summer was nigh. "Even know," he said, "my coming is at the door." Then Jesus said that that generation would not pass until all of these things be fulfilled. So the rebirth of the nation Israel marks the final generation of man upon the earth in this present order.
On the average, about once a year from the time of Christ, we have had major famines that have killed large numbers of people in localized areas. This year, there will be 120 million new individuals born. Roughly 15 million will die before they reach the age of 5 through causes that are related to inadequate food. That represents 1/3 of the total death rate that will occur this year. 48 million people will die. 15 million of them will be babies who die because of malnutrition. The situation is even more grim and more tragic than that. One of the most important forms of undernutrition and malnutrition is the failure of the child to get adequate protein resources to support its growth during its very early childhood development. If this happens, then the brain simply does not develop normally. These children grow up permanently stunted in their mental capacities. 7 of 10 are permanently stunted because of failure to obtain adequate sources of protein.
We have not been routinely immunizing against smallpox since 1971. because there's been no smallpox here for years, and therefore each year there were more complications from the immunization, and no one was getting smallpox, so it was decided that it was unwise to immunize people. So soon we will have a whole generation of unimmunized people, and the prospect of enemy action seeding smallpox virus into our atmosphere is quite frightening.
The fact is that a biological agent, when used according to certain doctrines, can have a very devastating and final effect on the personnel on whom it's used.
Another of the major concerns today is the energy supply on the planet Earth. As man is using up the fossil fuels which cannot be replaced, he is turning more and more to the use of atomic fuels. These also pose a problem to the survival of man in finding a safe way to dispose of the waste materials that are still highly radioactive. Solar energy has often been suggested as a viable alternative, but with the billions of dollars and also the time needed to develop this resource, it is extremely doubtful if it can be ready in time to avoid disaster.
Ozone is a minor but extremely important constituent gas in the stratosphere. Stratospheric ozone screens harmful ultraviolet radiation from the Earth's surface. It is therefore principally the potential effects of increased harmful ultraviolet radiation, such as skin cancer and biological and agriculture effects, that are of concern.
When the age of industrialization came, it seemed to promise man a utopia, a way to improve the quality of life on the Earth. The need for fuel necessary to run this industrial complex can be the very thing that will destroy man as it eats up all of his natural resources. Another specter haunting man is the dwindling food supply. With the population increasing so rapidly, and 2/3 of the world already suffering from malnutrition, the scientists that have studied this problem are quite concerned about the next 20 years when they anticipate that the present population will have doubled. I'm Chuck Smith, and I'm also concerned about man's survival upon this planet. For many years, I've been studying the sociological trends, the population patterns, and the environmental conditions. As man has been living so thoughtlessly as though there were no tomorrow, it is rather frightening to realize that he might awake one of these mornings and find there is no tomorrow. I am convinced that in spite of all of the gloomy forecasts by the social scientist and the environmentalist, the world is on the verge of the most glorious age that man has ever known. All of these things that have been happening on our planet, the famines, earthquakes, the pestilences, the world wars, the false messiahs, are events that were predicted by Jesus Christ as signs of the end of man's futile efforts to govern himself. In the Bible, there are predictions of world events that must have seemed absolutely incredible to the people of that day and age. And as he saw that picture of destruction that would take place when Titus came in, he wept over the city. But Zechariah tells us that he's coming again, and his foot will set in that day upon the Mount of Olives, and this mountain will actually split right in the middle. And Jesus will then make his entrance again into the city of Jerusalem through this gate that is shut. For Ezekiel said that he saw the gate towards the east and it was shut, but he said it is prepared for the prince, that he shall enter in by that gate.
And now, on behalf of the Word for Today, the broadcast ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith, we thank you for joining us in today's broadcast. For more of Pastor Chuck's studies and biblical teaching resources, visit our website at pastorchuck.org. You can contact the Word for Today